Welcome to our epic ocean, where critical solutions to a planet in peril are brought to the surface. Our epic ocean celebrates all that is epic about the ocean and why it is the planet's most vital resource. And now to our host, Rich German.
The story begins in 1989. An array of hydrophones called SOSUS, built by the U.S. Navy to detect enemy submarines, picked up some strange signals. They were whale songs, and they were similar to blue whale calls, but there was one big difference. The key notes of that song were at a frequency of 52 hertz. It has been detected regularly in many locations since the late 1980s and appears to be the only individual emitting a whale call at this frequency. It has been described as the world's loneliest whale. A legend is born. Hey everyone, it's Rich German, and my guest today has over 20 years of experience in marine conservation, corporate sustainability, and global philanthropy. She is the CEO of the organization named after that whale, and Lonely Whale is a fun community co-founded by actor-turned-activist Adrian Grenier, best known for his role in HBO's Entourage, based on a deep love for the ocean and a passionate concern for humankind. Dr. Dune Ives, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so glad that you are here. So we're going to get into your background, but first let's talk a little bit about Lonely Whale. So your campaigns, mostly plastic related, tend to be fun, loving, and lighthearted, yet always data-driven, grounded, and strategic. I'm curious, is your focus more on creating individual behavioral change, or is it more about changing the system itself?
Well, good questions. When we first started our campaign work, our intention, honestly, was to help people realize that there's an ocean out there. This great big thing that covers 3/4 of the planet, and most of us have absolutely no idea that it exists, nor do we have a relationship with it, nor do we know that it is the single most important thing for life on this planet. So that was the intent, and we came about plastic pollution because we realized that's the one threat that we can all really respond to. We can see it, we can touch it, we can feel it, we can own it, we know our role in it. And so we thought, okay, well, what if we did a campaign that was focused on plastic pollution, but really was about the ocean? Could we get people to start paying attention, and could we get people to start caring for the ocean and to really care for each other in the process? So that's really where it came from. I would say where we started was trying to change corporate behavior. So our main focus for our straw campaign was Starbucks, being the most ubiquitous brand around the world. We thought, okay, if we could change Starbucks, we can change anything. And now where we are from a campaign standpoint is we understand that to create real lasting behavior change, we have to change the system all the way from the very top down to the very bottom. And there's lots of levers to pull and lots of needs that still exist.
That's great. I always have felt the same way. It's like this ocean, the ocean is so huge, it's so vast, and there's so many challenges that it's complicated. And so I get what you're saying about picking plastic, because it's something we all use. It's something we all know we use too much of, and we can change our behaviors that might have an impact, even if it feels like, can I make are my changes that I take on going to make a difference to the big picture? So changing corporate behavior and the system is ultimately what you're going after, which makes sense. And I think it's kind of a top-down approach and a bottom-up, right? We got to work with the corporations and work with individuals also, which obviously a lot of your campaigns that we're going to talk about are focused on. So if I were to say, hey, Dune, give me the elevator pitch. What is the number one overall goal of Lonely Whale?
Today, it is really to connect people with each other. That's the number one overall goal. We firmly believe that if people are more deeply connected with each other, if we understood the position that people are coming from, if we listened with intent, if we were humble in our approach, that we might just reach across the aisle, right? That proverbial aisle. We might just fight for justice for every person on this planet. That's really what we're aiming for these days. And we'll still do that through our campaigns. We'll still do that through the lens of plastic pollution. But really focusing deeply on social justice and equity and really owning our role in that as an environmental organization is front and center for all of us.
Is that a newer focus based on the events of the past year, or is that something that really was in the heart of it when it was co-founded in 2015?
When we started our campaigning work in 2017 on straws, what we realized very early on is there is an entire community of people out there, the disability community, that need a plastic straw for drinking anything, water, it doesn't matter what it is. And
Right.
so we were really intentional about reaching out to the community and trying our hardest to incorporate that into our campaign work. I would say in some cases we were successful, in other cases we failed at that. But that was a really important lesson for us, that if we are going to solve for the environmental issues, we have to solve for the environmental issues for everybody. Nobody can be left out of that conversation. The events of 2020, we've been sitting with them for a long time, like I think a lot of people have, both the pandemic and how we need nature and we need wild more than ever to be able to heal this planet.
Hmm.
Plastic pollution and the realization that communities who are fence line communities, really on the front lines of oil and gas and petrochem, they need this change more than anyone else. And then with the Black Lives Matter movement and a focus on BIPOC communities, we have really intentionally challenged ourselves to question, are we really allies in this space? And how are we showing up? When we did our water bottle campaign, we knew that there was an underlying issue related to access to clean water, and that access to clean water is a human right. And in year 2 of our campaign, which was 2020, we were supposed to be doing that work, but we held on all of our campaign work given everything going on. So I think it's been the base of a lot of our work, but we really haven't let it come to the top in the way that we really want to these days. I think another important learning from the last year is that self-care is so important. Man, this is hard, isn't it? It is. It is hard to see so many families. It is hard to see so many people hurting, and I think there's so many fights going on right now. And at the root of it is this need to, care for yourself, to love yourself, and to love your neighbor. And so really thinking deeply about how we do that in our work is really a cornerstone as we move forward.
I love that you share that. One of the things that's been a consistent thread through pretty much every interview that I've done on this podcast, and it's not what I expected, but the common thread has been what you just said. It's been about love. I thought it was going to be like to fix the challenges of the ocean. We need to change this system, and we need to work with the government and policy and all these, heavy lift feeling things. And I'm not saying those things don't need to occur also, but pretty much every single guest, and sometimes it takes till 90 minutes into the interview to get there. I love that it took you about 2 minutes.
It's like,
But
what do you
that
think?
common thread is, if I'll say it this way, if we learn to love ourselves better,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to love each other better, love each other more. We're going to just naturally make better decisions that are going to help our own health. We're going to make better decisions that are going to help our family, our community, the ocean, the planet, the dolphins, the whales, everything. So, I mean, it really does. I love that you shared that. It really does, in my mind, too, begin and end with self-love. So it's a beautiful thought. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I've learned so much from working with Adrian. I would say that that's really his influence on us as an organization.
Mm.
When I first started working with him, we were agnostic to the ocean health issues that we were going to focus on, because there's so many, right? Pick one. I
Yeah.
often say,
Yeah.
like, you put a piece of paper on the wall and you write down all the ocean health issues and you throw a dart at it, you're going to hit something. And it doesn't matter which one you work on. You should just work on one of them, or two or three, and just do it as well as you possibly can. But we talked about things like, well, should we publish a top 10 list of things you can do to save the ocean? And Adrian was adamant, and I couldn't understand why for the first year. But he kept saying, it's not about the list. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter what people do. There's some things that are more impactful than others. But we shouldn't give people a list. What we should do as an organization is we should help them be curious. And we should engage them in a way they want to be engaged. And I think that's right. There's so much out there about how bad it is and what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And it's paralyzing.
It is.
And at the end of the day, maybe what we should be doing is breathing. Maybe we should just sit, and we should just feel what we feel. And we should invite somebody to sit with us and to have a cup of tea. And in doing that, maybe we have a conversation with each other that ends in something that we never expected. And we should just let that happen instead of being so rigid and so dogmatic about it has to be 30% or 10% by this day. It's those targets matter, but I think we lose sight of the fact that we are human. And at the core of our humanness is connection, which goes right back to that whale. And why I think I was so captivated by that story is that it was the first time I had heard something that made me feel like, I know how it feels to not be connected. I know how it feels to be lonely. I know how it feels to want something that you can't have. And maybe it's just that connection that allows us to have the conversation we need to have about where are we heading and what are we okay with and what should we really be fighting for.
That's beautiful. And as someone who probably loves whales and dolphins more than anything on this planet, that story means a lot to me. And I actually want to come back to that story in a bit. But you mentioned Adrian. So Adrian and Lucy Sumner co-founded Lonely Well in 2015. I believe you joined the year after. I'm curious how you got involved. Like, did they see their vision starting to take root and they said, oh my gosh, we need someone that has Dune's skill set to take the organization to the next level? How did that play out?
So I was working at Vulcan for Paul Allen at the time that Lucy and Adrian started the Lonely Well Foundation. And when I left Vulcan, Adrian and I have a mutual friend, Susan Rockefeller, who said, oh my gosh, he is just the nicest human on the planet. You deserve to work with the nicest human. And he has no idea what he did in setting up a foundation. So he needs you more than you need him. So I'm going to introduce the two of you together. And it was amazing. Like the first conversation I had with him, I actually still have my notes, verbatim notes from that first meeting. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what this guy is talking about. Like what is going on? But what I took from the discussion was, this is a really nice human. He's a really nice man, and he is very thoughtful, and he is very smart. And so I agreed to fly out to New York to meet with Adrian. I met Lucy, and I met our teammates, Emma Riley and Emmy Kane at the time. And in that first meeting, it was great. It was like a half-day session, and we talked about a lot of things. I asked a lot of questions, like, what's your goal? Questions you're supposed to ask when you're thinking about taking a foundation job. What's the goal? What's the change you seek? The impact? What are the resources you have? Like, what's worked already? And I remember through that conversation, there were a lot of, that's a good question. We should figure that out. And during those hours, I remember thinking, I don't know if I want to take this job. Maybe I do. I'm not sure yet. And so at the end of the meeting, Adrian said to me, well, are you going to take the job? And I said, well, are you going to offer the job? He goes, well, I'm offering you the job. And I was like, I think I need to think about it. And he stood up and he put his hand across the table and he reached out for me to shake his hand. And I knew at that moment, I was like, all right, I'm taking the job. How am I going to say no to this guy? And it's been an amazing journey ever since. They're an incredible duo as well. Lucy is the life of the organization. I mean, she's amazing. And she brings a very different skill set than Adrian does. So very much on the production side. They're both incredible storytellers. So I think we're a really good trio. We always have been.
What was your hesitation when you were sitting there? You were like, I don't know if I can do this. What was going on in your head?
Well, I mean, I kind of felt like I should talk to my husband about it. It's a big change. Leaving Vulcan was a big change. This is a big change. It was starting from scratch. Very few people, I think, know the early story of Lonely Well. I think they thought maybe we had an arsenal of cash or, like a big war chest. We had basically nothing. So I said yes to something that I was going to be creating. And I didn't know him. I'd never watched the Entourage series. I only watched the movie, and I was like, I don't know. The movie wasn't that great. So I really had a lot of thinking to do. And then, when he reached his hand out, I was like, no, let's just do it. Like, let's make this happen. This is different. Like, this feels to me exactly what is needed in this space. Two storytellers who understand the value of high production quality and marketing content. And honestly, like, we're missing that in the environmental space.
Yeah.
That's why people don't hear the message. Only a small group of people hear the message of how bad it is. But to get a large group of people to hear the message of how good it can be, that takes somebody who knows how to market with Nike or with someone else of that caliber, to really build in those marketing comms messages. So I felt like, gosh, I'm going to learn a lot. If nothing else, I'm going to learn a lot. I think I'll have fun doing it.
Nice.
And
And
then
you're
we
still
went
there.
dancing all night until about 4 a.m. So that was fun.
So let's back up a little bit. You work for Paul Allen. For anyone that doesn't know who Paul Allen is, tell us a little bit about that experience. Obviously, you mentioned Vulcan, but he's probably best known for his work at Microsoft. So who's Paul Allen? What'd you do there? And how did that kind of prep you maybe in some way to do the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm so fortunate to have been able to work with Paul. He and his sister Jody, true visionaries in the environmental space. So Paul Allen was the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates, and he created a holding company called Vulcan back in the mid '80s, and it was what all of his assets really flowed through. He created the Paul Allen Family Foundation and had a big focus on arts and education and work kind of within the backyard of the greater Pacific Northwest area, had helped to protect over 500,000 acres of old growth forest and important trees all over the Pacific Northwest and down in California, and had just started to do work internationally in Africa and other places working on species protection. And what he needed is somebody to come in and help give his environmental portfolio some shape and form. So I was really fortunate to join in 2013. I will say there are big thinkers in the world, and then there are big thinkers like Paul Allen. He and his sister, they were two sides of the same coin, really incredible. So I got to work on everything from climate change. We sued the U.S. government. It was so amazing. I loved it. Climate change, ocean health, species protection, wildlife trafficking. And
Wow.
then I was at the helm when we led the Ebola campaign to help prevent the spread of Ebola and to help prepare for the next pandemic. So for me, what I learned working with Paul and with Jody is that you have to have this mentality of you never stop. You have to be willing to think like you've never thought before if you're really going to make an impact on these big issues that we're dealing with. And you have to leverage every single asset that you have. Nothing can be left on the table. So that's a lot of the mentality that I've brought to Lonely Well is how do we think differently, but how do we constantly challenge ourselves and make sure we're not patting ourselves on the back too much, right? Because the issue is still there. Maybe you get one win,
Yeah.
but maybe that win created unanticipated consequences. And so how do you have a humble approach, but just constantly keep pushing? I learned a lot of other things as well, which is a whole nother podcast, but really an amazing experience. I was so fortunate to have worked with Paul and
Oh
Jody.
my gosh. And Paul passed away in what year?
I think, oh my gosh, I think 2 years ago. I'm bad with
18 or
years.
19?
I
I
feel
think it
like,
was 2018, maybe 2019. Yeah.
yeah, I'm in a
So
COVID fog with years.
yeah, exactly. So I'm curious with working with Paul. Obviously, when you have a massive amount of money, that gives you some power. One of the terms I've heard you use a lot is radical collaboration, which I'm a huge believer in working together. And to me, that's how it's kind of like we started this by saying human beings need to work together as individuals. I also believe organizations need to work together, just like I didn't mention at the outset, by the way, Lonely Well is one of our partners at my nonprofit Project O. So we obviously believe in collaboration. What does radical collaboration mean? Is that something that you learned from Paul also?
One of the very first projects that I led for Paul was the development of the Great Elephant Census. And it was intended to count every single living and dead African savanna elephant across more than 20 countries within a single year. Now, to pull off a feat like this, you need a whole bunch of airplanes, and you need a lot of researchers working together. Most of these researchers believe that their way is the only way to do research. So we needed consistency in the methodology. We needed to have government support for this. We needed to have a lot of different parties working together. And that's really hard to do. It kind of doesn't matter how much money you have, so we had a very healthy budget for this project. And it was my first experience working in the nonprofit sector. And I took away, gosh, collaboration is really hard. It's necessary because without it, in that case, you get inconsistent findings. And then you can't do anything with the inconsistent findings. Then government can't pass policies. We can't actually protect the elephants. So in a way, it was like the elephants were dying because of us, because we can't get along, right? We can't actually come together and make a decision that benefits more people. Um, so so that was a big learning for me. And when I joined Lonely Whale, Adrian said, and I agreed with him, that everything we do has to have at least one nonprofit partner or corporate partner. And the point of that for us was, we're humble enough to know that we don't actually have the answers. We have a lot of questions, but we don't have all the answers. Chances are there's somebody out there that has the answer, and if we reach out and we try to work with them, well, then maybe they'll give us the answer. And then we could just go, what's that old saying, like, you go further faster together.
Right.
So maybe that's what will happen. So our straw campaign, we had over 100 individuals that participated in our Stop Sucking PSA across multiple countries within the first 3 months. It would not have been possible without them. And we're always trying to create assets that other people can pick up and they can run with, and they can do with them whatever they want to do. We're not precious about those assets. So that's how we've contributed in this space. But I would say for us, we recognize, especially with Black Lives Matter, we need to do a lot more listening than we've ever done before. We need to, make sure we're testing this concept of collaboration. Are we being good collaborators?
Yeah.
Where are we being good collaborators? How can we be better? And how are we really showing up as allies in this larger conversation? So I would say we're founded on it. We've done a lot of it, but we have so much improvement to do.
Yeah, we all do. But it sounds, I'm hearing a lack of ego in there and a lack of need to, we did this on our own. Look at us. Look how great we are. That's just not in the conversation, which is great. Let's go back to the story of the whale that we started with. So it's, to me, a sad and beautiful diary of human discovery and connection to one of the Earth's oldest and most sacred, mystical, wisest creatures. And this inspiration to create a nonprofit to support cetaceans, for me, it's like the most honest and empathetic action that can be taken in the 501c3 world, that's for sure. I read the opening quote from one of the letters by Leslie Jameson, who was at the time writing 52 Blue, and she wrote, "Humans are social animals, and the lifeblood of society is conversation." So is the Lonely Whale organization designed to really open a dialogue that is long overdue with our relationship to the ocean, to the animals, and based on what you're saying, to each other? Is storytelling really at the heart of what you're doing here?
It is. I would say that we've been doing more storytelling from within the organization and less collecting and encouraging the stories of others, but you're going to see that shift over the course of the next 2 years. A good example of that is with our young ocean heroes. So we have an ocean heroes program. A mutual friend's daughter is like ocean hero number one.
She is. We're going to talk about that and her for sure.
Okay, good. I love her to death. That whole program is amazing. But we have kids from all over the world, so more than 70 countries, over 1,200 kids that we've directly trained so far with a number of NGO partners and the UN environment. And each one of these kids has an incredible story to tell. Yeah. I think for us as an organization, this last year has been a big learning for us, that we are the keepers of stories. We can amplify stories, but we are not the storytellers, right? So we've amplified the issues through storytelling, but as an organization, we are not the storytellers ourselves. It's these kids who are on the ground doing this work every day. And so we're really looking at how do we help them tell their stories better? What are the tools that we have? What are the platforms we can put them on? How do we help them find their voice and then amplify their voice once they find it? And and that it's being really well received by their peers and by others across the community. I mean, they have these incredible stories that are so inspiring. And I think the big challenge for us is to then not let those stories let us off the hook for the work that we have to do as adults to really help support their dreams and their visions
And their future. That's,
and their
that's
future.
well said. So historically, obviously, the media tends to focus on fear-based content. Clearly, there's a financial reason for that, and humans are obviously motivated probably more often by fear and pain than, moving away from pain versus towards pleasure. And I guess my question to you is, are these the kind of stories that we need, or is the world ready for more positivity and hope? When I look at movies like Fantastic Fungi, it's all about possibilities and using knowledge and nature for change. Where do you think we're at as a society?
I think as a society, we are still very reactive. I don't know that that's ever going to change. I think as human beings, right? If you walk up the stairs and your breathing is heavy, are you going to do something about it, or are you going to wait until the heart attack? Most of us wait until we
True.
don't then just go start walking for our health. So we tend to be very reactive. And we also tend to love the sensationalized stories that are out there. So when you look at how we respond as a global, group of humans, as a species, we respond when there's a global crisis, a threat. We give tons of money when Notre Dame is burning. We are outraged about what's happening at the border. And yet we don't often spend time looking around even our neighborhood and being really proactive. I do think that there is a place for that negative rhetoric, for the cold hard facts, how damaging it is, how painful it is. But it has to be met with the stories of hope and inspiration. And I think the reason for that is we don't all consume the same kind of information at the same time. So there may be a group of people for whom the straw coming out of the turtle's nose was the thing that got him. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of people who are turned off by that, who needed stop sucking. And so we need to constantly produce content and messages that hit a spectrum of individuals and what their interests and their needs are at that moment, because it changes over time, but at that moment. And I think importantly too, taking a look at where people are consuming content. I read there's a Harvard Business Review article out about how Gen Z is consuming content, and they're consuming it from video games. They're in the video
Hmm.
game. There's concerts happening within video games. There is contests happening within video games, live all over the world. This is the new platform. The new social media platform is inside the video game, right? So we have to
Wow.
also really look at how do we reach people, and where are we willing to go, and who are we willing to partner with to make sure it's the right message, the right time, but it's through the right individual, the right deliverer of that content.
That's interesting. So I want to shift into specific focuses of Lonely Whale. And the first thing I was going to bring up is how you've been successful with social media. You won, was it the Cannes Lion? Is that how you say it? In 2018 for a TikTok campaign, right?
That's
That was an
right.
urgent call about plastic pollution. You mentioned Stop Sucking a minute ago, campaign in 2017 for a strawless ocean, which brought in a lot of celebrities and tons of press. So how has using visual media helped really create global awareness to the issues that you're, really focused on?
I think it's critical to it. It's important for people to be able to see themselves in something, right? So when you look at a PSA, we call them, affectionately our plastic service announcements. You see a wide variety of individuals. You see different ages, genders. You see members of the BIPOC community, LGBTQ. You see people whose first language was English or not, and it's a range of religious orientation as well. And that's really intentional so that you can see yourself in the person that is on the screen. So that's one way that we use this visual content. And then with the social media challenges, it's really focused on user-generated content. So we wanted to create properties that we put out there that other people can just kind of beg, borrow, and steal, right? That's the greatest thing, is if somebody steals your campaign idea, cool, do it.
Go
It's like
for
the ice
it.
challenge. Why did
Yeah.
it work? Is because people could do they could throw ice on themselves in the craziest spots, and it was all Instagrammable. That's how
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
I would say that where we started from in 2017 with social media engagement to today, social media has changed completely. And so how we think about influencers, how we think about how we define influencers, how we think about different platforms, um, it's really important for us to constantly be looking at what's new, what's coming, and then what needs to be created as well. I would say, though, as important as social media has been for us, the grounded in real life experience cannot be replaced. There is something about, it's like it's breaking bread with somebody, right? You can't do that virtually. You can, but being together and
Not the
sharing
same.
space, so we're really looking forward to when we can get back to that moment.
100%. I actually spoke at an event this past Saturday here in Laguna Beach, California. And it was the first event that I not only spoke at, but been to in 12 months. And it was amazing to actually it was outside. There was like 100 people spread out. You could have fit 500 people in the space. So it was all safely done, but I'm with you 100%, dude. It was so much more powerful. It felt really good to be around other two-leggeds. It was nice. So, oh gosh, let's talk about next wave plastics. This couldn't be better timing. I kid you not, an hour before we went live here, I got an email from Lonely Whale, from you, saying that you just won a UNSDG Action Award for Next Wave Plastics, which is a global network of ocean-bound plastic supply chains. So tell me about this award, and more importantly, what this whole network is all about.
I mean, it was incredible. It was incredible to be part of that award ceremony. And I was shocked that we won. Literally, when they said Next Wave Plastics, I was like, what are you talking about? This guy from Syria who created this thing that is so amazing. Are you sure? So Next Wave Plastics was started in 2017. It was co-founded by Lonely Well and Dell Technologies. And we had a number of founding member companies like Herman Miller and Human Scale, Interface Carpets, Trek Bicycles, a couple of others that came together, and they decided that they really wanted to work together to be able to solve the ocean-bound plastic crisis, or the plastic pollution crisis in the ocean. And the way they wanted to do that is they wanted to build infrastructure and support infrastructure development where the plastic crisis is the most acute. So places like Indonesia and Haiti and Vietnam and elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And they then wanted to take the material that was collected and they want to integrate it permanently into their products so that it can never go back into the waste stream. And by doing this, what they're doing is something so brilliant. They're demonstrating that this waste material has value. And in demonstrating it has value and it can be incorporated, there really is no excuse for us to not recycle every single piece of plastic that has already been created that we could still collect and to use that material. So NextWave is working to develop the first global network of ocean-bound plastic suppliers, integrating it permanently into their products. We have a target of 25,000 tons by the end of the year 2025. We are en route for that. During the pandemic, these companies were amazing. Some of them doubled and tripled down, and they really supported the communities where this material is coming from. They didn't want to back down. They could have backed down, and they chose not to. So I'm so proud of them. And they're producing a number of products that are really cool, including, a water bottle holder, the Bontrager Bat Cage that Trek produces, made from fishing nets that the Borreo guys get off the coast of Chile. It's really cool to watch all this come full circle. But yeah, that award was pretty special. It's a testament to how hard these companies are working together and really challenging each other.
That's amazing. So congrats again on the award. And it looks like you have some major brands on board, right? I saw Dell, HP, IKEA. Is that right?
That's right. Dell, HP, IKEA, Human Scale, Herman Miller, Trek, Interface, CPI Card Group, SoulGuard as well. Adrian SoulGuard and his team are on board. And yeah, we meet 4 times a year. And those conversations are some of the most meaningful. There's a big challenge right now on the table of how can we deliver more social equity in the communities where this material is coming from? How do we better connect suppliers with each other and with brands to make sure that they're delivering on a social responsibility framework? How do we really do more. And that part of that too is do more internally at the companies. So these companies aren't just producing one product made from ocean-bound plastic. They're actually fully integrating ocean-bound plastic into their supply chain. I think HP has 50 products right now that uses this material. And they're also not just stopping at producing products with this material. They're getting rid of single-use plastics across their entire corporate structure. So every office building, how they think about procuring new products, it's really happening. I mean, they're looking everywhere that they possibly can to affect change and to make a difference.
It kind of feels like and you might know better, like they feel like I don't know if they need to do it or they want to do it, but it's almost like it's hit this tipping point where all of a sudden we might just see an explosion in what you're talking about. What's your take on that? Is it pressure from consumers saying, hey, we don't want your single-use plastic anymore? Or is it their consciousness has grown to the point where like, wait, we don't need to be doing this anymore? Where is this coming from, you think?
Oh my gosh. I mean, plastic waste was so invisible for us. So I was born in 71, and over the years, it's just become dirty, right? The planet has just become dirty.
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened overnight. And it's happened over a number of years. And when something happens over an extended period of time, like this 10 pounds I gained during the pandemic, what's that about?
It wasn't one big taco.
Exactly. It wasn't one big taco. But one day you wake up and you're like, wow, there's a lot of plastic on the ground. Or you go swimming in the ocean like you do all the time, right? And you see it float by and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? So things become normal, like wearing masks is normal for us now. We resisted it at first, right? But now we're like, it's not a big deal. It's just like plastic waste on the ground. So I guess my point of this is that we have become so accustomed to seeing plastic waste. And it has taken everybody's efforts, PPC and Greenpeace and everyone together, and corporations taking a stand on this as well, to start to turn that boat, which has all new meanings because of the Suez Canal, right? To start to turn the ship just slightly. These are big ships, they're hard to turn. We all know that now.
Yeah.
But to really start to turn things around, it hasn't been one thing. It really has been this collective action. And I think the Break Free from Plastic Act in the United States, I think David Attenborough, I think, Nat Geo and the Plastic versus Planet, all of these things have made a difference collectively. And so now we can't turn away from it. And now we know a lot more than we did a few years ago.
Yeah, very good. Well said. Okay, so now let's shift a little to 52 Hertz, your advisory service, another new project that you've just launched, if I understand correctly, with the Tom Ford Innovation Prize, where you're offering up $1 million to the best innovator for a sustainable alternative for thin film plastic, especially for bags. Tell me what the vision is here.
Okay, well, who knew in the United States, actually North America, we use an estimated 125 billion single-use plastic baggies and resealable bags. 125 billion, and none of those are recycled. Zero. Now, all right, maybe we get a couple of them, they sneak into the recycling facility, but there's no end-of-life solution for them. In addition to that, using very similar material, we have 180 billion poly bags that the fashion industry uses on an annual basis. And again, none of those are recycled. There's no end of life. So this is a really amazing, I feel like entrepreneurs and innovators' dream come true, right? If you can find an alternative that does more good than harm and eliminate the harm, you've got buyers all over the world who are ready to like pick this thing up. So when we started thinking about thin film, we were fascinated that very few organizations are looking at thin film plastics. And thin film plastics are everything. There's those baggies and the poly bags I mentioned. It's bubble wrap, it's shrink wrap, it's a plastic bag. So most organizations are focused on plastic bags or overwrap. So the plastic wrapped over the plastic wrapped toilet paper that you buy at Costco. Right. But very few were looking at these Ziploc baggies and others. So that was interesting to us. And for the most part, we found during a national poll that we did this last year that the majority of Americans, North Americans, including Canada, believe that these baggies are recycled.
Hmm.
So that is a great problem to solve. It's a huge hurdle to get over, but it's fascinating for us. We love big entrenched issues. So that's one of them. But we knew that we couldn't do a campaign without a solution that was readily available that could really scale in the marketplace equitably. There are incredible products like stasher bags and others, but those tend to hit a certain demographic and income bracket. But if we're really going to make a difference, we need to have products in the marketplace that can address the 65% of Americans whose children have reduced or free lunches at school, right? So it's got to be available to everybody. So that's why we started this Plastic Innovation Prize conceptually. Turns out Tom Ford himself was really influenced by Adrian when we came out with our straw campaign, and it changed the way that he and his husband think about their own home and what they're willing to bring into their home, and also what he does across his entire Tom Ford international brands. So there's no single-use plastic in any of his offices worldwide. It's not the only thing he's done. He's done a lot of work also in the fashion industry. Of course, we all have a lot more to do. It's a journey that we're all on. So he was also, very focused on eliminating single-use plastics. We were very focused on this polybag issue, 180 billion in the fashion industry. And so we came together around this concept of, well, can we inspire more innovation in the supply chain? Is this a way for us to start thinking about how we can create change at scale? And then we can come in with a campaign and we get people excited about the opportunity to shift this entire supply chain. But until that time, it's really hard to get people riled up about something if you can't point them somewhere. So that's where this Plastic Innovation Prize comes from. Because this starts to work more kind of on the corporate side, we've been really fortunate to bring on some incredible talent. Like, I'm so excited about our team. We have the amazing, incomparable Harry B., who is a marketing, communications, advertising wizard, giant creative from the marketing industry, ad industry. He was formerly the chief creative officer of Havas, and he's come on board to lead our internal brand studio. And then we have, which we call 52 Hertz. And then we have Lucy Sumner has come on board as our executive producer. So we're really excited about the possibilities that this brings for us, and to really, I think, start a conversation up about other ways that we can engage brands to be leaders and start to address more market gaps and bring solutions forward.
I love this. So is this a challenge grant, and is it meant to be a yearly quest for innovation?
So it's a 2-year competition with a 5-year trajectory. So by the end of 2025, our goal is to have at least 3 new products in the marketplace that can start to address this problem. The first 2 years is the competitive phase. We will open up the application soon. So I will let you know when that's going to happen. But certainly before we get into the summer months, we're going to open up the application and share the judges and the technical advisory teams as well. So once the applications go in, we will select the finalists at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And then we go into another year really of development with those companies to make sure they have everything that they need to really be successful.
Oh, wow.
At that point, then we get into a market acceleration phase. So we'll do testing in year 2 as well, and then we get into acceleration. And hopefully we start to see a dent in this polybag issue that we're dealing with.
Very cool. You sound very excited about this one,
I'm
right?
very excited. We've never done a prize before. So looked at lots of prizes when I was at Vulcan. We never did any of them, but I'm really excited about this prize.
So I want to back up a little bit. You mentioned how Tom Ford first saw the Strawless campaign, and that was kind of a moment for him where he wanted to make bigger changes within his company. And I meant to ask you, like, I would imagine there's definitely people that would say, oh, why would you deal with straws? There's way bigger issues that the planet is facing, right? Do you feel, I'm curious why you guys chose straws when you did. Was that kind of an an entry point to the bigger challenges. In fact, I just interviewed Cyril from
Mhm.
Parlay. Was that yesterday or 2 days ago? I can't remember. And he used the term that plastic was basically a gateway drug. Like he realizes it's important, and there's bigger issues that, like you said at the beginning, there's so many issues that we can be overwhelmed, but plastic is something that we all understand. We see it, we touch it, we use it, we can not use it. Was that kind of how you how, yeah, you know what I'm asking. How did you guys make the decision to start with Strawless in Seattle?
Well, when we decided to focus on plastic pollution, it's a massive issue, right? And I couldn't fathom the thought of hearing one more negative statistic about 8 to 12 million metric tons of new plastic entering the ocean every year. Like, what do you even do with that as a person? How do you even get engaged in that? It's even being in this space for 5 years, I still scratch my head sometimes going, really? PU and systemic is 5 million metric tons of new plastic entering the ocean every year by the year 2040. The best that we're going to do? That's the best case scenario. So, we looked at all these different kinds of plastics, and we just kept coming back to the straw. And part of it is because every time I would go out for a meal with Adrian, he would say no to the straw. And I was like, what is it with the straw? And finally,
He
after
hates
like
these
the third
straws.
time, finally, after the third time of that, I thought, you know what? It is. It's brilliant. It's the straw. Because the straw is really the easiest thing to say no to if you do not need to have one to drink, and a huge majority of our population does. So if you don't need it, don't use it. Just use the straw that you were born with, which is the one on your face. Like that really kind of so simple. Could it really be that simple? And so again, that's why we started with the straw as a way to pull people into the conversation about the ocean. So for us, it wasn't even about plastic pollution. It was about the ocean. And it was about getting people to pay attention to there's this big, beautiful body of water that Jane Nichols will say, rejuvenates you and gives you what you need to have a blue mind.
Mm.
And it is hurting. And we can't start with that hurt because it's too big and it's too hard, and most of us have no idea what it means. So that's really why we started with the straw. It is, I went on Tucker Carlson a few years ago, and it was actually the most amazing live interview I've ever done. And he started the episode by saying, I actually have to agree with you that. And I was like, okay, wait, I didn't plan for that.
Didn't expect that.
I didn't expect that. But I also think it is a very easy thing for us to all agree on. And the other thing about the straw that I really love is that most often when you are ordering a cocktail or you're having a coffee or whatever else, you're doing so at least with one other person. And so every time you say no to a straw, it gives you a chance to have a conversation with that person about what you know and reaffirm your choice. So you have greater conviction. And so I'm a psychologist by training. So for me, I was fascinated by, does that create stickiness with the issue that creates lasting behavior change?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is yes. That public conviction, that personal engagement with your friends and family, it does create that groundswell. So it was about a conversation about the ocean. It's the simplest thing for us to build success with, and success begets success, but it also changed the way that you communicate with your friends and family, those you are most close to, and your work colleagues in an intimate setting about plastic and about the ocean. And that creates space for a larger conversation. I think it is the perfect place to start with our environmental issues. We just need to find the straw corollary in everything else that we do.
There you go. So it's not being naive to the bigger issues, is what you're saying, correct?
I would dare to say, every single organization focused on plastic pollution right now understands that it was never about the straw.
That's right.
They understand deep sea drilling and mining. They know about toxins and plastics and warming and acidification. I think it takes an entire community of NGOs working together on all these issues at the same time and to support each other to make the kind of change possible that we know that we need to make.
I agree. There's a lot of issues out there. So Let's go back to something we only touched on for a second, which was Ocean Heroes Boot Camp.
Yes.
This is something that is significant for me personally because one of your great ocean heroes, who you mentioned already, Coda, is the daughter of the executive director of my nonprofit Project O. So you've got Coda, you've got celebrities like Goldie Hawn, you've got, of course, Adrian, plus the man you just mentioned, Wallace J. Nichols, Danny Washington, amazing people involved. What have been some of the wins and milestones with this program with engaging the younger population?
I mean, this is the thing that keeps us going. We love this program so much because the kids are incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
So we have, there's no shortage of success stories with these kids. I think one of my favorites is Dyson Chi. So we met him at our first boot camp in 2018, and he was so quiet and so reserved, very shy. If you engaged him, he would talk to you. But if you didn't engage him, he probably wouldn't talk to you. And over the course of 3 days, his peers nominated him to do a pitch session at the end. And there were only, I think, 10 kids that did pitches. And so he was one of those 10 kids. And he found his voice. For the first time, he says, and we did a podcast with him, and he will say, I found my voice at Ocean Heroes, but what I found was my superpower, and I realized that my superpower was being a kid. So he goes back to Oahu, and he starts working to support Bill 40, probably the most comprehensive, important legislation that we've seen on single-use plastics anywhere. And he rallies his youth friends over the next 2 years, and they get this thing passed. So for me, it's incredible that he helped pass this bill, and there's lots of people who came before him. This bill has come before the city council so many times, right? But it happened. But I think even more importantly than that is that Dyson found his confidence. Dyson figured out his purpose in life, and his purpose in life is to be a politician. And that is so exciting. Steph McDermott, who also is a 3-year veteran of the boot camp, she created our first regional boot camp in the Caribbean last December. She's done amazing things outside of this as well. She's an incredible young woman. She's a force of nature. When she single-handedly, though, created this regional boot camp and saw over 100 kids across 18 island nations and multiple NGOs supporting, you can see the organizer in her, right? She knew exactly what she wanted to do and how she was going to get it done. So everyone has a very different story of where they came from, where they got to, the policies they passed, corporations that they've helped to inspire change towards the ocean vision that we all have. Importantly, they're really close friends, all of these kids. They have found community, and it's amazing to see them just bubble up with joy when they get back together. They've created lifelong friendships. I would say Coda is another one of those that has an exceptional story. And her story, in part, is due to the relationship she built with Chloe May in trading stories with each other and strategies about how do you change a school district? Who do you talk to? What is the evidence that you need? And man, those two girls have just lit not only OC on fire, California on fire, and really have paved the way for others to get involved. Coda is now working with a young girl in the other Manhattan. Coda's in Manhattan Beach. The other girl is in Manhattan. And together, they're going to be doing some really incredible work. So there are so many stories like that just continue to bubble up all over the world.
So Coda's Manhattan Beach, California, and the
Yep.
other is in Manhattan, as in New York City.
Yes.
So it seems to me that, and I'm glad you told the first story there, that self-esteem really seems to be at the heart of this endeavor. Was that by design?
I think at first we were like, gosh, if we could just help them come together and learn how to campaign together and learn how to collaborate, that would be a huge win. And along the way, what we've realized is that the power of the Ocean Heroes Bootcamp program is we're teaching fundamental leadership and confidence skills. With Coda in our 2020 Ocean Heroes Bootcamp and the work she did with Goldie Hawn, Coda taught us about self-care. Coda taught us about breathing. She taught us about being
Meditation.
still. Meditation, yeah. And that's something that you're going to see from us moving forward is how do you find space in your life to to replenish your heart and your soul. What does your daily journal of gratitude look like? So we're expanding that relationship with Goldie Hawn and her Mind Up program. Couldn't be more tickled to work with her. She's, of course, one of my idols.
For sure.
Love her. Um, but yeah, the self-care and the realization that these kids are dealing with some pretty deep and pretty serious eco-anxiety and depression. And so how do we as an organization give them what they need and really listen to them and build the tools and share the tools that work for them already with each other so that they can all support each other?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I think these kids who are just, Coda's such a great example. I forget how old she is because you feel like she's, she's just so advanced for her age and such a high consciousness level. And I think what comes with high consciousness at a young age is also great sensitivity. And so these kids they feel probably at a deeper level that we do in general when it comes to the challenges that the planet faces. So I always say that we as the adults pretty much screwed up the planet, and it's going to be the children, the next generation, who kind of clean up our mess, which kind of seems unacceptable to me to let them carry that burden. It really needs to be an all hands on deck approach. So yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts on that, actually.
I think you're absolutely right about that. It's, we can't let the burden of cleaning up the planet be on the kids. Some of the kids, when we started our boot camp program, would graduate in the year 2030 when all of these SDGs have to mature, Sustainable Development Goals. And we really took that to heart very seriously, that what world are we leaving them? And how do we fight right alongside of them? So at Lonely Well, we're committed. Every year we have a boot camp. We put out a new campaign that hopefully supports these kids, gives them the cover that they need, gives them tools as well, so that we can really support them and fight right alongside with them. But it's the onus is on all of us to make this change happen, and more quickly than we think we need. I don't think we have 10 years to solve for climate change. I think we have 3 at best. So we're really as an organization, we're reorganizing, we're re-looking at ourselves, we're asking ourselves, how do we take what we know how to do and apply it differently? How can we scale these things up more quickly? How can we accelerate progress where we're seeing it? And are we truly humble, right? Have we shed all of our ego? And what work do we have to do there so that we can make sure we can really show up?
Mm, that's beautiful. I love the things that you shared here, just especially with the kids part. Like, it would be easy just to put these kids out there that look good, they're well spoken, and make them kind of the face of the whole thing. But the fact that you're really going in with a concern for them and their well-being and helping them to be stronger and more confident, just the energy of it just feels really good to me. And I'm, like I said, I'm biased based on my relationship with Coda, so it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, so in the time we have left, doing any other projects? We haven't talked about how you hydrate, or sea signs, museum of plastic. Anything else you want to spend a minute or two focused on here?
Oh, the one I would love to talk about briefly, which I love, and it really came out of COVID. It came out of shelter in place, and it came out of Black Lives Matter as well. Is our virtual initiative that we call Sea Signs. So Sea Signs is it's not written by a bona fide astrologist or someone who is considered to be kind of in the top of their field. It's actually written by 2 people on my team. And
Okay.
what we wanted to do is we wanted to connect individuals through astrology with climate change issues and plastic pollution issues. And so what we do on a monthly basis is we publish your new astrology reading for the month. If you're a Gemini, what is the month going to be like for you? And how can you turn that into something fantastic for plastic pollution or climate change? But the other thing that's been really great about Sea Signs is we've been able to commission a lot of incredible original art from BIPOC artists from all over the world. And that art is so beautiful. So we published a climate change series, a climate change leaders series. And it was one of the most well-received things that we have done. So we've got 12 original art pieces that are being used for a variety of projects, including a new one I can't share right now, but a new storytelling project I'm really excited about that hopefully will roll out in June, and I'll make sure that we share that with you before it goes live. But I just love what the team did, and trying to be as thoughtful as we can, still pushing the conversation about plastic and climate change, but doing so through a different medium, no pun intended, but through astrology and connecting with that really accelerated medium. But that it's a really accelerating area of interest for a lot of people, especially Gen Z and millennials. So that's been a labor of love. It's been really fun to see how that's growing, and have gotten a lot of really good feedback from astrology leaders online, like Queer Cosmos
Nice.
and others.
It took me a minute to catch the medium joke. That's good. I got to ask you, I saw, not only did an hour before we went live, I saw the email about the award that you guys won, but I also saw a notice that the movie Seaspiracy hit #1. I don't know if it was in the US, but definitely, I think it was UK for sure. It's like the #1 movie on Netflix right now. And when I think about, I've watched it twice actually, the night it came out, and again a couple nights ago. And it makes me think of when you talked about kids and how they just seem to know a lot of the things that we are just learning. And when I think of food and not eating animals, it seems to be more natural for them. I'm just kind of curious what your take is on the movie. If you've seen it, maybe you haven't seen it yet, but there's definitely some controversy around the movie in terms of way some of our nonprofit organization friends were treated and some of the stats. But at the end of the day, I think the message of eating less fish, if we love the ocean and the life in it, that's probably not a bad message. So just curious if you've seen it and what your take was.
I have seen it. I've also been sitting with a lot of the feedback that is coming around about the treatment of the NGOs, the issues itself, the gaps that exist. I mean, no one piece of content is going to get it right. Remember when Al Gore came out with his film, all sorts of criticism, right? Especially the call to actions at the end. And so I think with any content, what we need to look at is, did it further the conversation? Did it effectively represent issues in the right way? And we may not be happy with how certain individuals look in the film, right? Or how their voices were kind of brought forward. But I look at, did it change? Did it change the conversation? Do we now have more people who are curious about this? Well, I didn't know that's what's happening in the fishing industry. Maybe I should learn more about the fishing industry. Does that change the way somebody thinks about the next time they go on vacation and they charter a fishing boat? The recreational fishing industry. So that's what I'm looking at is how does it really change people's curiosity about these issues? I mean, last summer, what was the #1 series on Netflix? Tiger King. So sensationalism and films that create tension that's what people gravitate towards. And so what are the lessons that the movement can take from that as well? How do we create tension? Jody Allen always used to say, you have to think like the enemy if we're going to win this fight. And she's exactly right? So if the environmental community is always nice and correct and on point, and they play by the rules, I think we will always be upset when we see that someone doesn't. What lessons can we take from that, though? How do we take some of those lessons and turn it into action that allows our voices, that allows our message, our calls to action to be the ones that hit #1? That's what we need to really be talking about.
I really appreciate that answer. And you obviously didn't know I was going to ask you that, so I kind of put you on the spot, but I think that was really well said. And to your very first point, if the goal was to raise awareness,
We did that.
absolutely doing that. I saw an Instagram post by Ali, the filmmaker, and I'll just assume that he was being sincere, and I think he was. It was just yesterday where he said, like, he thought that his film would live, I think he called it, in the dark corners of Netflix. And for him in the UK, he's from the UK, to see his movie #1 in his country, it was just like mind blown. So it's definitely raised awareness, and I think in some ways will be a wake up call, for everybody, right? So we can look at both sides of it, and it's absolutely created a conversation. And I'm glad I asked you, because you're in the business of creating, like we said at the beginning, it's about creating conversation, and it definitely has. So, Dune, you are amazing. Couple things I'll say as we wind down. Number one, we will definitely share links. We talked about all your different programs, and we'll share links for everybody so they can check them out. So two final questions. One being, what's the best way that people can support Lonely Whale?
Go to lonelywhale.org. Sign up for something. If you have art that you would love for us to share across our social media channels, there is a place where how you can get involved. You can put that there if you want to volunteer, if you want to know more. We've got newsletters, campaigns that are very active. So just go to lonelywhale.org. You'll see all of our programs, but tell us how we can connect with you and how we can best support your work. That's the greatest thing that you can do right now.
Beautiful. And then my final question is, I'll just give you the floor. Any final thoughts or comments that you want to make for people watching and listening?
I mean, this plastic pollution crisis is solvable. And I don't believe that I don't believe that we're going to hit 5 million metric tons of new plastic entering the ocean in the year 2040. I think it's going to be a lot less than that. So I'm really optimistic. I'm really hopeful. I know it's going to take every single one of us to make it happen. And I would say, if you don't know where to start, just start somewhere. Just do one thing and invite a friend to join you. And do what Jay Nichols says, right? Connect with water in your home, in your community, in your neighborhood, and let water heal you as you're trying to heal the ocean.
Well, that is a beautiful thought to end on. So, Dr. Dune Ives, you have been an amazing guest today. I'm really glad that Adrian put his foot down and closed you at that restaurant in New York City, and because I think you've really been a catalyst in taking Lonely Whale to that next level. And I'm not only excited to see where this organization goes over the next several years, but it's critical to the health of our planet, to our ocean, our dolphins and whales, our marine life, and us human beings. So keep up the great work, and I'm excited to be friends with you and partner with you in what we're doing, and I'm sure this will be the first of many conversations that we have. So thank you so much, Dune. Thank you, everybody. That's our show, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.